If you're chronically online like me, then at some point you've probably seen the barrage of Shein hauls that constantly permeate the internet.
So today, or actually yesterday, I got my Shein package.
Shein's business model largely relies on digital influencer marketing, and with the large swaths of influencers that continue to promote their products, they've been able to accumulate billions in revenue. But with that widespread success has also come widespread controversies that have led to Shein having a reputation of being downright shady. To name a few controversies, Shein has been found to severely underpay their workers, exploit and plagiarize designs of emerging creatives, and produces garments that contain an unsafe level of toxic chemicals. A documentary entitled Untold Inside the Story of the Shein Machine, which was made by a reporter named Iman Amrani, took viewers into Shein's business model and featured an undercover investigation into the Chinese factories producing the clothes. The documentary explores the real cost of Shein's cheap clothing and the price human lives have to pay in return for a polyester crop top that will cost less than your morning iced oat latte.
If you want to take a day off or go back to your hometown, your wages will be deducted. This is completely unreasonable because there's no rest at all. I feel really, really tired, exhausted.
We discovered that there were people who were working 18-hour days, which is against the law in China. It's also against Shein's code of conduct. People were given 1 day off a month, and many people came to the factory and lived nearby in these kind of dormitories, which meant they couldn't visit their families and they couldn't go back home very easily, or they would have their pay docked. There were other concerns about the fact that the environment was very pressured because the production level is so high and it's so fast. They have to make so many items of clothing and they have to work on commission. So it means that it's a very, very stressful environment to work in, and not one that I think most people would want to work in.
The film offered an undoctored view into the factories that Shein uses when manufacturing their clothing, and it revealed that employees are severely overworked and underpaid, earning less than $20 per week. Shein reportedly produces 1 million garments per day, which begs the question of how on earth can you ethically produce 1 million garments per day? According to the ethical fashion brand aggregator Good On You, Shein's business model creates the following environmental issues. None of Shein's supply chain is certified by labor standards, which ensure worker health and safety, living wages, and other labor rights. There's also no evidence that it ensures payment of a living wage in its supply chain. They also use few eco-friendly materials. There's also no evidence that they've taken into account meaningful action on how to reduce or eliminate hazardous chemicals in their clothing. Finally, there's no evidence that the company has a policy to minimize the impacts of microplastics. Despite this, the hashtag Shein hauls continues to be one of the most prominent hashtags across social media, with 6.9 billion hashtags found on TikTok alone. Shein's popularity comes at the expense of the workers who reportedly are only given 1 day of leave each month and were actually even found to be washing their own hair during lunch breaks due to their toxic working environment. In Shein's own 2021 Sustainability and Social Impact Report, they themselves found that 66% of their suppliers' factories violated their code of conduct, with a further 12% in violation of their zero tolerance violation policy. Over 700 audits were completed in 2021, with 14% of factories found to violate working hours and another 27% violating fire and emergency preparedness. So with all of these widespread widespread controversies that Shein has found themselves in the middle of, they decided, let's do some damage control by having these influencers fly out to China and visit one of their so-called factories in order to convince people that all of this information that I just gave you about how toxic the working environments are, all lies, pretty much, according to Shein.
We just pulled up. My mouth, I'm still picking it up off the ground. It's so big.
Today we are at the Shein warehouse
Where the products come directly from this facility to your home.
I went on a brand trip to China with Shein. I still can't believe it.
And today we got to visit one of Shein's leading factories where they produce the clothing. I'm not gonna lie, I really expected it to look like it does in the movies, like really dark and dingy, but I was really surprised to see each piece handled with care. And it was also nice to see our Shein designers there and so happy seeing their products being put into production.
One influencer in particular by the name of Danny Carbonari, better known as Danny MC on Instagram, went viral for a video in which she documented her visit to, quote, the factory of the leading manufacturer of Shein, as well as the company's innovation center. Danny, who describes herself, of course, as a oh my God, it's just too funny. She describes herself as an investigative journalist, said that she was excited and impressed to see the working conditions at both facilities. She also claimed that she spoke to an employee at the Shein Center's fabric cutting department. She said that she was, quote, very surprised at all the rumors that have been spread in the US.
We've come together, signed a contract, I signed a deal with them, and they've come all the way correct. So that's the first thing I want to note, is that they take care of their creators, and especially as a plus size creator, I am about 60% of the time underpaid, and they have definitely not underpaid me and taken great care of me.
Getting to see the whole process of Shein clothing from beginning to end with my own two eyes was so important for me. Kicking off the trip by heading to the factory of the leading manufacturer for Shein was the perfect way to start. I was really excited and impressed to see the working conditions. The next day, we headed to the Shein Innovation Center. This facility blew my mind. It's over 600,000 square feet. There's so much technology, and Shein is just such a developed and complex company, and it was so beautiful to see firsthand. I was able to interview a woman that worked in the fabric cutting department, and you guys know me, she's an investigative journalist. So I asked her all of our questions, and she answered them honestly and authentically. She was very surprised at all of the rumors that have been spread in the US. She told me about her family, her lifestyle, her commute, her hours. Our last stop was to the Shein warehouse. This place was massive. It's about 84 acres and almost fully run by technology and automation. I was really impressed by the extensive checklist that each item had to go through before it's shipped off. I think my biggest takeaway from this trip is to be an independent thinker, get the facts, and see it with your own two eyes. There's a narrative fed to us in the US, and I'm one that always likes to be open-minded and seek the truth. So I'm grateful for that about myself, and I hope the same for you guys.
My first takeaway when I saw the group of influencers that had been invited to this brand trip was that these influencers were very much being taken advantage of and exploited, because I think it was very strategic that they chose influencers that were plus size, influencers of color, influencers with smaller followings as well. Danny in particular said that this was her first brand trip that she'd ever been on. Does that sound familiar? It reminds me of all the drama that happened with the Tarte brand trip, what was that, a couple months ago, where they sent those 3 smaller black influencers who, again, like for some of them, it was their first time ever going on a brand trip as well. So all of that to say that Shein, it seemed to me that it was very deliberate that they chose people who would be desperate enough, people who were, you know, vulnerable enough. And I'm not even trying to be disparaging to them by saying that they're desperate, but it's very clear to me that they chose a very specific kind of influencer who is not used to being invited to brand trips, who is more willing to say yes, who would therefore be a little bit more gullible than your average influencer who's been around the block and who's not so desperate to go on a trip. But luckily, people on the internet were quick to call out this trip for what it was: propaganda, damage control to make Shein look better. And it was very obvious that this factory that they took all of these influencers to was very much staged, obviously to garner good publicity, to say, well, you were wrong. I found it really appalling for her to say that these things were rumors, as if they were not corroborated facts proven by audits and an actual investigative journalism, right? Like an actual person went undercover and found all these things. All of these audits were performed. All of this information exists that is easily verifiable, and she's calling them rumors. Following the widespread criticism, Danny then posted another video on TikTok in response, saying that she was not paid to say anything.
So here's the deal, okay? One, stop telling me to Okay. Second, I know exactly who the I am. I know exactly what I'm doing. Third, could never, will never be a sellout ever in life. I was not paid for any trip or to say anything. I have so much more awareness of what's going on behind the scenes than any of you ever could because you don't see what's going on.
Did you not just say that you were paid in May? Roll the tape back.
We've come together, signed a contract, I signed a deal with them, and they've come all the way correct. So that's the first thing I want to note is that they take care of their creators, and especially as a plus size creator, I am about 60% of the time underpaid, and they have definitely not underpaid me and taken great care of me. They have definitely not underpaid me and taken great care of me.
Definitely not underpaid me and taken great care of me.
Shut up! That is so stupid!
Just because you visit one facility or even two facilities that the company arranged for you to visit, it's like, did you think that you were going to get invited to a facility that was run down and that had really poor working conditions on full display? Like, did you really think that they were going to fly influencers down and do anything but be on their best behavior? These women, because they were being paid to go on this trip and being paid by Shein, clearly, allegedly, that they were eager to just take the check and pretty much say whatever Shein wanted them to say, all in the name of just money over morals. But I think this is a classic example of the Streisand effect in full display, where you go through all this trouble trying to cover something up and you end up making it worse for yourself, right? Like Shein went through all this trouble to fly all these influencers out, to reset the narrative, and the internet clocked them right away. It actually made things worse instead of making it better. What you would do to make it better is actually pay your workers, treat them equitably. And Shein's latest controversy is that they have been hit with a huge RICO lawsuit. And this is according to Time magazine. 3 independent designers have filed a lawsuit alleging that Shein sold, quote, exact copies of their work, which they argue violates the Racketeer, Influence, and Corrupt Organizations, or RICO Act. The RICO Act was originally put in place to target organized crime per the U.S. Department of Justice, but racketeering also applies to, quote, egregious copyright infringement. If you're wondering what all that means, this gentleman on TikTok explained it perfectly.
Shein, the fast fashion company. You know the one you recently saw those influencers travel all the way to China to like walk around that warehouse and that factory, be like, oh, Shein's so ethical. This is the best way to do fast fashion. Look, they have so many women employees here at this sweatshop. That organization is being charged with a RICO violation through a lawsuit. RICO stands for Racketeer, Influence, and Corrupt Organizations. That is a charge that was originally created to combat the mafia, is now being used against Shein. Basically, a bunch of independent artists are suing Shein because so much of their artwork and designs have been stolen and then sold through Shein. And they are alleging that Shein has created an organization of shell companies that, in a way, no one can sue because the entire organization of the business is fucking corrupt. So basically, they have shell company A sitting all the way over here, and they steal the design. And then they partner with shell company B. Shell company B makes it. Cell company B sells it to cell company C. Cell company C then markets it to cell company D. Cell company D then sells it to Shein, and then Shein puts it on the internet to sell to you. Their lawsuit alleges that all of that is Shein. All of it. So yes, what do Shein and the mafia have in common? The fucking RICO Act of 1970, baby.
I understand that Shein's clothes are really tempting because they're super cheap, and it appears on the surface that you can get a lot of clothes for less money. I get it. I mean, the prices of clothing these days are unbelievable, but it's like you're actually not saving money in the long run, because the gag is that a lot of poor people are scammed into buying really cheap clothing under the guise of you're saving money, right? But because because the quality of these items of clothing is so poor, it actually does not end up lasting very long. It has zero longevity, ends up being thrown away. By the way, living in this culture where I've talked about extensively on this channel, where people are so consumed by their aesthetic, and it's like, if I wore it once on Instagram, I can never wear it again, right? So people buy this clothing. Not only is the quality not good, but the trend cycles are so short that people end up wearing it once, maybe twice, and never wearing it again. And guess where it ends up? In a landfill, further damaging our environment. But I really don't necessarily see the utility in shaming the consumer, right? Because I get it, but there are certainly better alternatives when it comes to any billion-dollar corporation. There's always going to be shady, unethical practices at play. There's always going to be people who are severely underpaid, who are exposed to toxic working environments, people who are exploited, manipulated. There's always going to be that at play for any major corporation that you can think of, because under capitalism, there is no 1% without the rest of the people being at the bottom, being taken advantage of, being exploited. And the people who work the hardest are the ones who have usually the most inhumane working conditions. But there are things that we can do as consumers, such as thrift shopping. But a larger option to me is we all need to be invested in the just dismantling of capitalism. That is the larger issue, right? That is the systemic issue, because this is bigger than Shein. This is bigger than one company. There are tons of corporations that do this, that take advantage of people like this. There are tons of corporations that violate people's human rights, right? That means no more wealth hoarding, regulation for labor. That means, fair and equal pay. And that does not mean that this happens like I snap my fingers and it's done. Obviously, this takes generation after generation of activism work in order to get there. But I'm deeply invested in that because it simply just makes me so sick to see how these companies just take advantage of their workers. What we're seeing right now with the writer strike and with the Screen Actors Guild has now gone on strike as well. We're really seeing how, even the people that we perceive as being wealthy, everybody thinks that, oh, you're an actor, you must be wealthy, right? But the large majority of actors are not Brad Pitt. They're not Angelina Jolie. They're not A-list actors who are making bank. That's simply not the case. And so it's not just workers who are in a factory who are getting mistreated. It's actors. It's probably you right now or you in the past. All of us at some point in our careers, if not currently, have been mistreated, underpaid, have to put up with working in a toxic work environment, because under capitalism, we never know when the rug is going to be pulled from underneath us. We've got to pay our bills. We've got to pay our rent. It's just a struggle all the ways around. The second part of this is something that I talk about extensively on my channel, is resisting trends that are fueled by corporate greed, right? So just because something is trending on social media does not mean that you have to run out to buy it, because whatever's trending today is probably not going to be trending tomorrow. But I'd love to hear from you all in the comments down below. What are your thoughts about Shein and how they use these influencers? I'd love to hear from you all in the comments down below. And thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all next time.